What is happening, everyone? Welcome to the Rixican Show.
Back
We're back.
again.
Yes, it's Donnie's kicking cancer's butt. We've been doing more shows.
Yeah, I was out for about 3 months, right?
It seemed like it.
And but I needed that time to recover.
Yeah, off and on. But yeah, we're seem to be hitting the road hard and running, interviewing lots of people. We had Joey Creed on yesterday.
Before yesterday.
Was it?
Yesterday was the cancer.
Oh yeah, cancer found. Anyway, I don't even know where I am.
We have UFC representatives on tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. So we're trying to do some things on our lunch break. Today we're going to introduce Carol Lewis in a minute, the superintendent of the Moses Lake School District. We'll beat her up a little bit, and
We're nice. Are we?
are we?
Bring it on.
We'll be all right. Let's see. At Rick's, we got Tejano this Saturday. So those that like Latin dancing, come on down.
Karaoke on Friday night.
Karaoke Friday and Saturday.
And Saturday. Wow.
Yeah, we have multiple rooms, so we can do multiple events.
Oh yeah, that's right. The rabbit hole.
No one else can do that. Very good.
I gotta say too, just get it out of the way. We got High Five on tap, $6.50 a pint, and now back when I drank one of my favorite beers, Stella Artois is actually on tap as well too. So and today's special is the Hawaiian Mountain Man. It is $16.99 for the burger and fries today. So come in, try today's specials.
Donnie knows more about my specials than I do. Well, he asked the cooks and stuff what's going on. So very good. Thank you. Well, Carol, throwing some punches, right? I do feel for you as a business owner. There's things I do in choices I make, and the community will love it or hate it. No matter what I do, I can't please them all. And I feel like you're in a similar situation. And I guess as a business owner, I have to take responsibility for calling the shots of how I do things. And there's no perfect way. There's no perfect way in a business. The employees always think it's run crazy, and or they think they can do your job and until they're in your shoes and you're like, have to look at the numbers and things. It's just it's a different world and a different perspective, at least in my opinion. Now you're dealing with a much larger operation than I am. I mean, I just a little construction company and in my little restaurant bar that I have here. But I do notice there's got to be some similarities. So how are you taking the heat?
Well, I guess I don't necessarily see it as weak all the time. I see it more as interesting problems to solve or interesting people to try to reach out to and build a relationship with. So I guess in a short way to say it is, and this has been something I've been reflecting on quite a bit, is that relationships are the most important thing that we can have. And certainly we have about 1,500 total employees with the school district. So it's not really practical for me to think that I'm going to have a one-on-one personalized relationship with everyone who works in the school district. But I do try to open up those channels as much as I can through doing things like spending a day in every school and every department each year. I did that last year, and I'm in the middle of doing that this year so that people can see me as a real person, someone that they can talk to, reach out and ask questions. I still send the entire staff, every employee gets an email from me every single day, just with some sort of update or encouragement or whatever about what's going on. And people often, because of that, people that I have never even maybe met face to face can reach out to me personally and have a question. And I appreciate that. So you asked how I'm taking the heat. I guess I'm taking the job as a huge responsibility and one that is going to be continually focused on building relationships and rapport with the people that I lead, so that we can have maybe a seat.
So anyone that knows me, and when I talk about education, I always say, especially when you had the crisis and the financial problems, I was always like, the most important thing is working with other people, relationships. I always say that. I think that supersedes math. I think it supersedes everything. I deal with a couple businesses. I use very basic math. Most of my like intellectual stuff I do is very basic. Like I went to school and college and like I was like educated in a broad area, but when it all comes back to it, most of what I do is very basic. But the relationships, I think, is key because there's always going to be a math wizard. There's always going to be an English major that's correcting my English. There's always going to be, people that specialize. And most of what I do is working with other people, these relationships. And so I think when you had the financial crisis going on and however many millions it was, I mean, it was crazy. Um, One thing that I've heard on social media that you're criticized for was like you were there for part of the old guard. Can you explain yourself there?
Sure. So I began working in Moses Lake School District as the assistant superintendent in the summer of 2022. And as we unpacked the financial crisis, it was a 4-year downward trend. And when you look at the data, so it had been brewing for a couple of years prior to that, but it really took a steep dive right around that same time that I came to work in the school district. And I know that there's been criticism and questioning about did I have anything to do with that. And at the time, as the assistant superintendent, I was really responsible for working with our teaching and learning staff. And I wasn't privy to the finances of the school district. And in fact, even when I had asked to see financial documents and budgets and things, because I've been around schools for a long time and I knew that that was important, it just wasn't a focus. And those things weren't provided to me and others who were asking. And so ultimately, I recognized there was a big enough problem when the double levy failure happened in 2024 that I went beyond our school district and asked for help from our educational service district or ESD. And so I can say, yes, I did watch as this unfolded and I did have some thought that something's not right. And I was asking questions. And when I finally pushed past people internally and asked questions of those outside, did the digging and found the errors that added to the fact that we had also a double levy failure. So I could confidently say I was not responsible for those errors, but I am responsible for fixing those errors. I chose to take that on. And so that's where we're at now. And we're doing a good job of getting it fixed up.
So if I could compare the situation to a person, I feel like the school district became a stroke victim. Lost half the use of its body, right? And you're trying to function, and that's when you're like, now you're superintendent, take this stroke victim and teach it how to talk again and walk again. So now that we're, I guess, past the brutal part of it, and we're learning to walk and talk again as a recovering stroke victim, are we at 80%? Are we at 90%, 95%? Like, how whole are we now?
Say we're somewhere between 80 and 90%. We're approaching 100%, but our percent is going to look different. And I actually really like your analogy of a stroke victim because many of you know that I'm very into health and nutrition and things like that. And so oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes there are some habits that lead up to someone having a stroke, right? And the school district definitely had some habits that were leading to overspending. In fact, our audit results from the 2022 to 2024 period just came out and showed the district was spending more than it was bringing in for a few years. And so as I help rehabilitate this damaged stroke victim or school district or whatever we want to say, it's my job also to create and enforce, if you will, those healthy habits that are going to prevent this sort of thing from happening again. Because if somebody has a major medical issue that's brought on by habits, they're going to have that happen again if they don't change their ways. And so my role right now is, now that we are rehabilitated mostly and on our way to being whole again, is to make sure that I'm instilling, fostering, supporting people through the changes that are required to generate those healthy habits.
That's a great answer.
No more questions. Anyone else? That's just interesting. Yeah, and I think just watching social media, I think people expect us to be at 100%, whether we have a levy pass or not.
Yeah.
In that, I mean, I just read the article basically, and I go, wasn't that audit kind of basically during the financial crisis? And people are like, oh my gosh, I'll never vote for levy again. And I was like,
Well,
we knew there was a million problems then, but you're comparing today to yesterday. Anyway, I think maybe some people either don't read the articles or it's just
yeah.
what do you do?
It is confusing though. So that audit so we had 3 audits over the last couple of years. So we had 2 federal financial audits, which were completed a while back, and then the big accountability audit that was for the 2-year time period. So the 2022 to 2024 time period. Of course, that was the time when all of this was happening. And I actually am really appreciative of the audit results. We did have audit findings. We knew we would. And the thing is, nothing was found that we didn't already know. And nothing was found that we hadn't already started correcting. So creating those healthy habits. So to continue your analogy, what that audit did was identify, yep, these were the causes of the stroke. And we knew those things, right? As soon as we started uncovering all of this back in the spring of 2024, we started to make some pretty drastic changes. And so there was nothing in that audit that was a surprise to me or anyone who's close to the finances of the school district.
Yeah. So you're basically, you said 80-90% whole at the moment. In the coming months, years, it'll keep getting corrected.
Yes.
I guess the budget the haunting of the past will fade because new budgets come in.
Yeah.
Is there such thing as 100%?
Well, how I would define 100% is there's a couple different ways, I suppose. One of the ways I would define that is that we have a money in, money out budget. School districts are supposed to spend the money that comes in, right? And that's what it's there for. And that's been a criticism of the public a little bit. Well, they're stockpiling money. The other thing we're supposed to do, though, is have a fund balance that would sustain us through unanticipated expenses, like if a roof happens to fail, or that occasionally the state will get funky with how they allocate money, and so we need to be able to make payroll if the state decides to fund us one day late or something like that. So you have to have a fund balance. Once you have that, which we do expect to have, or be darn near close to 100% of our required fund balance by the end as things shake out by the end of the fiscal year, which is August, September of this year, we expect to be there. After that, we should have a money in, money out plan. So we should be planning to spend every dime that comes in, but not more and not less. And so, I do expect that we will have that situation as we head into the next school year, or be very, very close. So I'm going to say 90, 95, maybe close to 100% as far as that goes. The other thing is figuring out what are the educational needs of our school district. What do our kids need? And how do we make sure we provide that within the constraints that we have? Because we can't do everything. And I get questions all the time about, when are we going to go back to the way it was? And again, those were unhealthy habits. We can't go back to the way it was, but we have a great opportunity to reimagine things, to say, are there other more efficient and creative ways to get everyone what they need within the finances that we have? And I love making analogies to personal finance, and that's what we do in our own homes. If we want to have a healthy, sustainable financial plan, we don't overspend. And sometimes we have to make tough choices and make decisions about what's our top priority. If we only have this much money and we want 3 things, but we can only afford 2, what's the one thing that's the lowest priority? And then how do we shape that out? And of course, when you're dealing with a school district, we have over 8,000 students. We have, like I said, about 1,500 total employees, plus all the families in the entire community. Priorities are going to differ. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, how we think of it at this point with our new financial team is students, of course, are the center of every decision. So if we're going to spend money on something, how is this going to benefit students? And it may be an indirect benefit. Having custodians in our buildings to keep them clean is an absolute benefit to our students. It's not going on in the classroom while they're learning, but it's definitely important. having safe facilities is definitely beneficial to our students and our staff. So students is the first lens. And then we try to think, how are we going to then take care of our employees, make sure we have an appropriate number of employees, we're not overstaffed, we're not understaffed, and make sure that we're taking really good care of the employees. And then last in that prioritized list for us is what we call MSOCs. So that's short for materials, supplies, and operating costs. And what we try to do, that's our smallest expenditure, but it's also our most flexible. So that's just the things that we purchase. And we don't, at this point, we don't purchase any unnecessary items. But as we think about adding back, or if we do have to make cuts in a place, we try to look there first so that we're not doing any harm to our employees and certainly not to our students.
I have a question from a viewer. I'm gonna word it a little bit because it's a little spiky.
Okay.
The question is really about teaching students things with ulterior motives, some agendas, other than what students need to learn in school.
Are you talking like state and government mandated stuff versus
First, yeah, stuff like that, and then
versus balancing a check?
making sure we incorporate moral compass and stop all the other garbage that's coming in.
Okay, well, that's an interesting question or comment. So as a public school,
I can't read it word for word.
okay, understood. And that's a common question in our community, and I think what it's getting at is how are we upholding the generalized conservative values of a place like Moses Lake and Grant County and several surrounding communities as well, while also complying with the law. So, and I'm fully aware that there's a lot of conflict in Washington state law and then maybe the localized values of a community. And so, first of all, we teach what the state requires us to teach. We have to do that, again, in order to get funded. I mean, that's just the basic. We are required to answer a very long questionnaire every year about, are you doing this? Are you doing that? There are some optional things on wants us to be doing that may not completely align with where we are in Moses Lake, and so we choose to not do some of the optional items that are on that list. We also, as our board considers policies and procedures, there is some leeway, and there's ways to insert some local thinking, local values into certain policies and procedures, and sometimes there's just not. But in Moses Lake School District, we always try to be as reflective of this community's values as possible. And if we do have situations where we have staff that might be teaching things that are not part of board approved, board adopted curriculum and resources, then we address that with the staff when we know about it. I know that was, and I'm going to just say to the person who wrote that in, I know that that's a kind of a very politically correct answer. It's a broad question, but my overarching answer to that is that as much as we possibly can, we strive to reflect the values that are held by citizens in Moses Lake. And we do have a diverse population in Moses Lake too. So while one group of people may want us to do one thing, another group may want another thing, when it comes down to it though, it's about ensuring that every single child or young
This person said they want education, not indoctrination.
Okay. Well, and I would encourage this person perhaps to reach out to me individually and talk about, because, I'm not sure this is where I want to take this podcast into indoctrination, but I would love to have a conversation with that individual. So I'll take this opportunity just to say, one of my most important things that I do is to interact with the community. And if somebody ever reaches out to me and wants to meet, to have a conversation, I'm more than happy to do that. So I'd encourage reaching out, and if they have specific things that they want to talk about, I would welcome that conversation.
I would say all education is some type of indoctrination. The home you grew up in, and if the values that you believe in were being taught, someone on a different viewpoint would be like, that's indoctrination. So no matter how you slice it, it's all
Agreed.
a form of indoctrination. I mean, we're brainwashed from just the household you were raised in, just being born into this world or country, whatever. We have a certain viewpoint. So I mean, it's all kind of indoctrination. I try to take a little time. If one of my kids is talking political, I'll usually try to point out the other side and go, why do you think they believe this? Or why do you think? Or I'll say, yeah, learn that for the test, but consider there's other viewpoints and beliefs. It's just school, it's just it's public education, so we are kind of squeezed by the people above, state or federal, whatever. I'm like, as a parent, I think we're ultimately, I guess, responsible. So if you need to point out something different, um, you know,
That's another thing too, is that we really try to focus in Moses Lake based on board policy on maintaining parental rights and not trying to change kids' minds as far as their core values go. We try to allow in every case, that parents absolutely have rights with their children, and we would not try to change those viewpoints. And again, if we have a situation where we have maybe an overstep, we are very committed to addressing that in a way that's constructive for the student and the staff member.
That was a hard question. I think a really good answer though.
yeah, I mean, that's all tough questions. I mean, my perspective might be from the outside looking in, from everyone's. I mean, I'm kind of, I guess, it's public education. I mean, if you don't like it, go to homeschool or private school. I mean, it's got some options.
It's kind of idea like if you want Burger King,
Yeah,
don't make McDonald's serve you a Whopper.
you have some options, and people choose those options, and that's great. Some people feel like they may not have a choice, but I think it's all just part of life. You have to live, and much of our education is going to keep going as you get out of the school or go to college or wherever you go.
It's really important to have the public input, because you as a person, people asking questions, that's where the school board policies come from. Is huge by listening to the community.
It is, and as much as the board can adapt and change things based on community input, I mean the board is the representative of the community, and so I think that's important to remember. Oftentimes, state law also impacts what can and can't be in policies, but as I mentioned, our school board, and I am employed by the school board. I am not the school board. So the board sets the policies, and then the district, under my direction, implements those policies. So, but I can say that our board is very attuned to the public and listens when the public reaches out, and they refer what they get from the public to me if it's an implementation issue.
How can somebody reach you if they have questions?
So they can reach out to me through email, through the school district office. So my email is clews@mlsd161.org, and they can reach out to me through an email. And like I said, I'm very happy to interact with members of the public who have questions and want to have conversation.
I was just thinking about the school board, and like any government or political office, whatever. I was wondering, what's the learning curve, right? You're going into the school board. Like if I was to run for office, and I'd be like, I'm going to the school board, I was like, how much would I have to learn to really understand? There's a learning curve.
There is.
And like, because everybody running, I always say this with politics, they swing their tomahawk and they're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, we're going to change this. And they get in there and they realize, there's no tomahawks allowed at the school. Here's a broken pencil. And you got to get agreeing votes on all these people. And here's the book of rules, all these laws that you got to abide by. And they're like, oh.
Yeah, so it is a pretty steep learning curve for many board members. I will say that our current board has taken on that challenge and done a really fantastic job of understanding their roles. I think one of the most important things and the first things that, because, board members run and they say, this is what I'm running on, my platform that I'm running on. But the truth of the matter is individual board members can't make decisions for the school district on their own. It always comes down to a vote of the board. And so the board always has to act as a body in public. So any decisions that they make are made in public at an open public meeting. And so that's something that that has to be learned by most new school board members. And very few come in with a background in education. We actually have one board member currently who was just elected who has been an educator, he's a retired educator. And so he has a little different perspective coming in, but still had to do all the open public meeting training and this and that. So, so the state agency, the Washington State School Directors Association, provides training for prospective board members. So anybody who wants to become a school board member would be encouraged to do that training. So
there's your chance, folks.
Right?
Pre-school board member training.
So yeah, it's online and
more indoctrination.
Yeah. So, so there is that, and then there's just a lot to learn about how just how meetings are run and what policy is versus procedure and how the school district works and really what the role of the board is. Again, is to set policy, not actually carry it out, and it takes some time and some effort and some trust, but building a good solid relationship between a board and the superintendent and the superintendent staff is really, really important. And I'm pleased that we're in a place right now where that is really pretty strong in Moses Lake. And I'm so grateful for that because when that relationship gets off kilter, it's really difficult for the entire community.
Yeah, I find it kind of, interesting. There's always going to be problems, issues with any school district. And I think every time something fumbles, everybody's like, fund out the school, like they just react to, and you're like, we're just a bunch of people trying to figure things out. And some people, there's going to be mistakes made. There's going to be, fumbles.
Yeah. Another viewer has a question, and this is, I think, a legitimate question. In the United States, there's been a decline in the education of children in the school district. What is the Moses Lake School District's plan to correct that and bring our students, at least, on the uprise?
That is an excellent question, and that has been what I've been talking about this, since the financial crisis, and as we talked about asking the voters to approve a levy. I got a lot of pushback and saying, we're doing so well academically in Moses Lake. We could be doing better. And so my overarching goal as we move past this financial crisis, I can see the finish line. It feels so good to be getting over that. We have got to turn our attention and our focus to academics. And we have to own where we're at, and we have to start making plans to have improvement because our primary purpose is educating kids, and we have all this other stuff that comes along with that. It's so important to keep kids safe. It's so important to build those relationships, like Rick was talking about. That can lead to better educational attainment, academic attainment for kids. And so the plan is this. We have the 4 pillars that we organize our school district around, and the very first one is teaching and learning. And I did take some heat for this, but I hired an executive director of teaching and learning and 2 staff to support that person so that we can start to turn our focus from cleanup, because that person's job also is to manage all of the state and federal categorical funds. We've had a lot of cleanup to do with that, but now that we're getting that shored up, the focus needs to turn at board meetings. We need to be sharing data. We need to be saying, this is how our kids are doing academically and socially, emotionally. And we had been, prior to the crisis, really working on that concept of collective efficacy, and that all of these kids are all of ours. Not my kids in my room and your kids in your room and these kids over at this school and these kids over at that school, rather than closing down like that and sometimes being competitive with each other. Really, in the end, 8,000 kids deserve a really strong education. And the more that we can be a collective and work on their behalf and never say, that's not my job or that's not my student, because they're really all ours, we're going to get a lot farther. So in a nutshell, that concept applied to everything we do with kids every single day collectively, I believe, I know, because I've seen it happen in other places, can lead to higher academic achievement and much, much better relationships between students and between students, staff, and
I think so. I just went to a school theater play
I did too. It was up and down staircase.
up and down staircase. It was the last showing. My daughter's like, "You got to go," and I'm like, "You're running lights. Why do I need?" Like. But actually, it was a really neat experience for me. Again, because my biggest focus, belief is, working with other people, socializing is your most important skill. And I don't know how many students are in theater, but I basically saw, 50, 80 students have to memorize lines, rehearse, build props, I guess rehearse, rehearse, memorize lines, and they go through this whole thing, and you got a couple adults that are managing this chaos, and then they put on this performance, and I was like, that is so. Those little skills they're learning, they're learning. They're even people that have like no talent that are up there doing their best. You have people that have talent, and I was like, this is great because as a student, you're watching and you're observing what the strengths and pluses and minuses of each person is in a different position. Like, because you're going to deal with that again in the workplace. You're going to deal with that again as a parent working with other people. And it was just it was neat to see all that because I'm looking at it, I guess, from the business perspective. I'm like, this little operation is a business. It just the cash flow is different, and you're getting everyone coordinated. And then at the end, I got to see a lot of students emotional. They love their teacher. It's the last time some of them are going to be acting together again. I saw tears. Um, there, there was one freshman I saw had a little part in there, and um, I was like, this girl's got talent. Like she's going to go places if that's her path. So I was like, and I, and when I first saw her, I didn't realize, who it was. And I was like, is that, my daughter's friend? I was like, this girl's really talented. Cause, growing up, I'm from Southern California. So, um, not that it means anything, but in my high school, my older sister was in theater with Terrence Howard, and he went on. Now he's doing this like science thing he's talking about. But I'm like, he's in several movies, Um, but it was interesting to kind of watch and take a step back and be like, wow, there's a whole production and education going on these. The theater is kind of a weird, demanding thing. My daughter's like, "Can you bring us dinner? We're here until 8 o'clock at night." Like, you kidding me? But there's that. Anyway, a lot of socialization, and to me, I was like, that is great education or an experience to build upon, and it's. I guess you got to volunteer to do all those extra things. But anyway, I was very impressed with that. I was like, education is happening. Yeah, it wasn't math, it wasn't physics, all those things are important too. But I was like, this is what it's kind of all about in my mind. If you're on sports team, you kind of get a similar thing, working together, who's talented, who's not. But anyway, I was just very impressed with the whole structure of all that.
They do a great job with that. And theater is a really interesting example of a co-curricular activity. So it is a class, but then it's also extracurricular. So there's some. I actually was in their class when they were rehearsing that play during school day. But then they obviously have rehearsals till 8:30, 9:30 at night, and it is a labor of love. And and that and sports teams and things like that are hugely important to a kid's experience in school for many kids. And unfortunately, these are the things that are funded by the state. That's an exact example of why we said this levy is so important for our students, and continually so grateful to our community for their support when we didn't have the levy, and then in supporting with the levy, because it's those kinds of experiences that we can't provide unless we have local support. And so it's just very, very important. And one of our parts of our strategic plan that I referenced before, we have specific goals within there. And one of those goals is to get as many kids as possible involved in something. You know, it doesn't have to be sports, it doesn't have to be drama or band or whatever, but something, finding some way for kids to connect with adults as well as with each other to have that teamwork. Because you're right, that theater production is just an amazing example of so many important life skills that kids are going to need as they become young adults and go out into the world.
Yeah, getting on stage. Can I memorize all these lines? Don't mess up. And if I do, can I correct on the fly?
And help each other out.
Yeah.
All of that. Yeah, no, it's an amazing
What an
example.
education, yeah. Because much of school is kind of individualistic. Math, you know, it's like it's you and the book and the teacher. Like it's very kind of individualistic, and so I love the activities where they're getting together and working on all those things.
And I do too. I you know, obviously, I'm a fan of public education.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
31 for me, but because of that, because it has the great ability to truly impact individual lives and communities, and through some of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think we're running out of time here. You have other appointments and other, you know, teachers to beat on.
Oh, you know, I love our teachers
No.
and all of our staff.
Yeah. Well, good. Any closing thoughts?
Oh, you know, just thank you to you for inviting me back. I'd love to come at least once a year and just give some updates and answer questions. And I think I'll just reiterate the idea that we are here to serve the public. And so if people have questions and want to engage in productive conversation, please reach out. And
I get email address in the chat too.
okay, great. Okay, I
Yeah.
can't wait to see what emails I get. We send out a newsletter about once a quarter, and oftentimes in there are little QR codes, ways that people can get involved in different committees, respond to surveys, things like that. So get involved, you know, and if you see something about the school district that you're thinking, that doesn't seem right to me, or I wonder about that, we would so much rather have you reach out than to have false information floating around out there. I'm being frustrated without being able to have a conversation. So please connect. That's what I'd like to end with.
Very good. Quick little side note. I mean, you're doing a lot behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple things you've done, and then there's a lot you're doing behind the scenes, and you know, I don't think people you're graded in life on like the budget fumble, you know, the $1 million problems, and $20 million problems, and then, you know, resurrecting the stroke victim to be like, hey, we're at 90%, and everyone's like, but it's a stroke victim. Like it's like, how do you rebrand that? You know, we'll save that for another conversation, but it's like taking this thing, getting it functioning again.
Yeah. The truth takes a long time, you know, and trust takes a long time. So I think you just keep staying the course, and eventually it'll strengthen.
Yeah, very good. All right, we're signing out. This is the Rick Sicken Show. Thanks, Donnie Parker on the tech side. Carol Lewis, thanks for joining us. We will see you soon.
Thank you.